Our next speaker, we've been talking a little bit about trying to recruit the best and brightest to Pinellas County and being able to make a cool area that can attract young people who understand the development process, have creative ideas and good experience. And we're proud to have been able to attract our next speaker, Lyon from California, and he has potential to be that point person that Chris was talking about. He's the director of our Development Review Services and Code Enforcement unit, and joining the county 8 months ago from Redwood City, California. Blake began his career analyzing development proposals as an environmental consultant in Southern California until making the switch into local government, where he went to work with the city of Santa Monica. Prior to joining Pinellas County, Blake spent the past 12 years in Northern California with the Redwood City, where he most recently served as a planning manager. Blake earned an undergraduate degree in environmental science and a master's degree in public administration. He has also studied retail planning at Harvard University and urban design at UCLA and UC Davis. He's a member of the Congress of New Urbanism. So, Blake Lyon.
Thank you and good morning. I wanted to take a minute and rethink about what we heard a little bit from James Moore yesterday, because we heard a lot about talking about local government and how you all are doing things very well at the local level. And we heard a little bit about the importance of regional government, and I agree 100% with all of those requirements. Is there an opportunity to get my presentation up on the screen? All right. So while we're getting that going, I'll continue with the recap. I represent the local government side, and one of the things that I wanted to do, you may be thinking about Redwood City, California, what does that West Coast have to do with this West Coast? But one of the things that I learned in the local government context and in my experience with that is that many of the local elected officials look for opportunities where have things been done well, what lessons there are that have been learned, how can we go about doing this? And it's very fitting that I follow the two previous speakers, because one of the things that we've done in Redwood City was focus very intensely on streamlining that development review process. Redwood City is on the San Francisco Peninsula, about midway between San Francisco and San Jose. For those of you who have heard the term Silicon Valley, it's kind of at the northern end, although that's not a kind of a defined geographic area. It's a kind of an amoeba, if you will. Redwood City has its roots right at the northern end of that, has its roots at the southern end of the biotech and life sciences. So there's a lot of activity from the jobs side of thing, and they've had the difficulty of keeping pace with the housing development market and the Class A office market. And if you think this is a competitive environment, take a few months to go stay there, and you can see how competitive the high-tech industry is when you have players like Oracle and Electronic Arts and DreamWorks and a variety of these folks who can and do have that luxury and the wherewithal to pick up and move if at the local government level you're not being responsive. And so one of the things that I'm trying to focus on for you today is how at that local government level we can be proactive, we can be responsive, but not to lose sight of what Commissioner Seal said in one of those 3 Ds, which is the design side of things, that placemaking element of it. That's the planner wonk in me that's coming out. You'll see that kind of throughout my presentation this morning. And so now we're up. These are kind of my guidelines or my bylaws by which I am framing my conversation. Authentic places, I can't stress this enough, and I'll show you some images that conjure to that effect. But it talks about, and looking at it, it's the definition of authentic, at least from dictionary.com, talks about not false or not copied. And one of the things that I think we need to pay a lot of attention to is that just not anywhere USA. What is the character? What is the dynamic? What is the feeling? What are the things that draw people here? The things that people, the residents, the natives, what do they love? What makes that authentic? Effective local government. The definition of effective: adequate to accomplish a purpose. Again, helpful, allowing some of this development to occur. Local governments don't have the dollars to just pave the way on everything, so it's critical to be strategic about how you approach these things. So if I'm conjuring up some images and what that might look like, think about the placemaking aspect of this street. Is it safe? Is it inviting? Is it desirable? I think most of us in the room would probably venture to answer no to that. But if you could do this, and you could have that same thing. Now, this is a residential example. We could put the same thing in for office, or even in some respects, industrial, other uses. But placemaking is critical. So I'm going to skip through these pretty quickly because we did cover this, but this is San Mateo County. I'll pause on it very quickly with respect to some of the comparables. My presentation is not to say that you can pick up Redwood City or San Mateo County and bring it here. There's a much different dynamic there. You can see that if you look at nothing else besides the median home prices or the median home values. That was one of the principal reasons why you can attract people into this area. So it is a peninsula geographic area. There are multiple municipalities in this area, so there are some similarities that you can pick up on. Redwood City is that kind of pink area. Again, you'll see kind of middle of the peninsula between San Francisco and San Jose. These are some of the big national tenants, if you will, that are there from the high tech and biotech and life sciences. We do have in that particular area a number of choice employers. Specific to Redwood City, 19 square miles of land area. It does extend out into San Francisco Bay. The thing I wanted to note on this slide a little bit is that Redwood City very much, especially in the dot-com boom of the early 2000s, held on to a lot of its industrial land. They are the only deep water port in the south portion of San Francisco Bay. And it was critical for them to ride out that, and they actually responded much, much quicker because the industrial lands that they were able to preserve were critical in terms of riding that wave, if you will. Now, it wouldn't be an economic symposium if I didn't put up one pie chart or bar graph, so this is my one knowledge to that. If you can focus a little bit on the last two, the thing I want to show you is Redwood City was no different, like much of the country, in dealing with the growth periods and the decline. But what's critical is that last fiscal year 12-13 and 13-14, and their ability to respond. And one of the things, I'll take just a brief moment to talk a little bit about the history of it, but I won't go into great depth. But like a lot of the United States, in the 1800s, they had more of a agricultural. Redwood City actually got its name from logging the redwood trees and sending them up to San Francisco to build San Francisco in the gold rush era. That, like many cities, evolved into kind of an auto-dominated and kind of the post-World War II. It experienced the growth of the 20s and even into the 30s in the WPA eras and building new buildings. But one of the things that was challenged in the downtown environment was that automobiles became so prevalent and started taking those land patterns and pushing them towards the edges and the hinterlands. And so the minds of that time thought it would be appropriate to look at a downtown redevelopment plan where everything became a super block, where it focused more on the automobile and focused more on the vertical, and they lost the sense of placemaking. They lost the sense of the tangible aspects of being at the ground level and what those experiences were like. And I kid you not, this is not for comedy purposes, this is the moniker that it developed, Deadwood City. And it took local officials, community leaders, about 30 years to break that perception and get back to a vibrant place. And so it's important, and I wouldn't be a planner, I wouldn't be feeding the data geeks and doing all this kind of stuff if I didn't talk a little bit about some projections. I'm going to focus a minute on a few of the national trends that we're starting to see, and we can think about how they may apply to Pinellas County as a whole. If you look at population growth over the entirety of the country, we're talking about 106 million people by the year 2030. Those people have to be housed, they have to be educated, they have to have places to work. This is the one that I want to focus on a little bit. 50% of what's needed by the year 2050, by the mid-century, does not exist today. Okay? Take a minute with that. 50%. So that means if you go outside and you look around, half of what we need to accomplish or accommodate these folks doesn't even exist there today. So if you don't think about redevelopment or infill development, if you keep pushing, then those comments that we heard yesterday about energy costs or water distribution become that much more difficult. We've got to think about a new way of doing these. Okay? So this is the energy consumption, and the one that's the most favorite. I saw a quote in the paper the other day. It says, "Stop complaining about traffic. You are the traffic." You know, if we don't give people choices to not be single occupancy vehicles, if we don't get past this, if you don't know VMT, that's vehicle miles traveled. I heard a statistic a few years back that said, if we gave everybody in California a hybrid vehicle, the benefits that would go into that effort would be used up in 5 years because of the amount of increased driving that we're having to do, because we keep doing our housing development further and further out, and people are having to drive farther to qualify to afford a home and to do all of these things. If we don't rethink some of those things, we're going to be finding ourselves in a situation that is not sustainable. Now, one of the challenges that we've seen in the past growth, this is an example of one of the corridors in Redwood City, is we see countless places across this country that lack identity, that lack place. This is not unique to just Redwood City. You can look at Phoenix, where there's, you know, I live in the 12th house on the right with the red roof. I mean, how do you define, you know, where you live? Places like Cabrini Green in Chicago, where you know, they built this, and then it was such a slum, they tore it down within, and I think it had a life of maybe, and there's probably others that can tell me, maybe 40 years for a huge development like this. I mean, you know, places like Houston, where, again, we need places to accommodate this kind of stuff, but the pace cannot happen without that sense of place, right? We need to have that. That's what's going to attract those millennials. That's what's going to allow people. You know, my mother-in-law, when my father-in-law passed away, she moved in with us when we were living, and she loves the ability to walk downtown, to do this, to do that, to not have to drive. I appreciate that she doesn't have to drive. You know, that helps, you know, me on my bike and doing other things as well. So, you know, but allowing her to have that sense of freedom, that sense of ability to go out and interact and engage with that. Places like this where you can just hang out. You know, one of our definitions of success for downtown Redwood City was, what do you want to do tonight? I don't know, let's go downtown, we'll figure it out. There's a place to eat, there's something to do. You don't have to have everything planned to the nth degree, and they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they feel a part of that community. Now I'm going to take a minute in the remaining time I have this morning and talk a little bit about Redwood City's efforts in terms of its downtown precise plan. It can be a smart code, it can be this happens to be a form-based code, and I'll give you a little bit of plug for this type of methodology, but there are a number of different approaches that you can do in this context. Now, I'm not going to take time. These are a number of the different recommendations, but I do want to hit a few of those that are underlined and stress a few key pieces of that, but happy to get into further discussions or if it's appropriate, come and talk with you at another point in time. Knowing the economics. Redwood City, in its 195-acre downtown development proposal, looked at what the development appropriate height was. And one of the things that I stress on this, and I'll use California as an example, you all know that there's earthquakes out there. There's a very different dynamic between a wood frame constructed building that you can build up to 5 stories. And once you get past that 5-story height limit, you have to change to steel. That is a huge economic barrier to development in that area. So setting arbitrary government regulations that says you must do this or you can only do that, that don't consider what those building parameters are, is a lost leader. You just hamstrung your development community in doing that. Understanding the market cycles. We heard a little bit about today, this morning, and even in yesterday, about allowing some of this stuff to come in. Building a building that has what I'll refer to as a disposable storefront. You can scrape off the front of that, come in, apply a new surface, and now you have a new tenant that can come in there in a matter of days or weeks. It doesn't change the form of the building, it doesn't change how it relates, but you allow the market to drive some of those details. This is an example where you can see the building there. This is the 16th Street Mall in Denver, where the restaurant can come in, they can put up their color umbrellas, they can put up their outdoor seating, they can change a little bit of that storefront, and it doesn't change the integral use of the building. You still have the opportunity to work through the overall dynamics. You can still have your main tenants, but you have that vibrancy, that vitality at the ground floor. You have that stuff that at that first 14 to 20 foot level is tangible, is touchable. You can experience it very well. Now, this is my West Coast bias. You see the Disneyland effect up there. I did change it for you all, so it's the Disney World effect. But this is understanding from a local municipality level, what is your expectations of operations and maintenance? Think through that kind of thing. That's where your ongoing expense comes. Do you want to have the Disney World effect where they have a trash can every 32 feet, so when their customer comes in, they never have to walk more than 5 steps? That every person in that park is responsible from an employee standpoint. They don't allow gum for scraping up, picking up trash. What is your expectation as a local municipality? What do you want that standard to be? And then think through the design implications that that has and how that plays itself out. Think through the infrastructure. This is where local government can be critical. What exists? What's underground, on ground? What is it today? What does it need to be in order to accommodate some of that future development? When does it need to be there? An example in this scenario is we worked with an office building, a 300,000 square foot office building that was coming in, and we wanted to dual plumb that building or dual pipe that building so that it could be served with reclaimed water. But we didn't have the pipes feeding downtown yet. That wasn't going to come for another 5 years. But we worked with the developer to dual plumb that building so that when those pipes came, they could then be in a situation. And we didn't require them to put in all the pumps and everything else that was necessary at that time because it wasn't ready yet. So thinking through some of those things, thinking about what you want your urban context to be. In Redwood City, for those of you that are traffic engineers or pseudo-traffic engineers, you'll understand the level of service. We adopted a level of service in downtown as F. Cars were not the priority. People were. Allowing people. I had a guy come to me one time and says, I really like what you're doing, revitalizing downtown. It's great. I love taking my wife and my family, but I can't cut through to get to work anymore. And I said, perfect, it worked. And he looked at me and he says, what? I said, well, cutting through downtown is no longer the priority. Staying in downtown, patronizing downtown, allowing people to jaywalk, as illegal as that may be, it's safer. It allows people to feel and enjoy their experience. But think about the design. I can tell you this same example of a double detector check valve and fire connections and all that kind of stuff on the outside of a building has the exact same function as that. And I will tell you, this restaurant is wildly more successful. There may be something to do with the chef and the menu and all that kind of stuff, but I would venture to say from my planning side, it's much more aesthetically pleasing to sit out and have outdoor dining and walk by that kind of thing than the other. Okay, this is a little bit about thinking about crosswalks, pedestrian safety. Think about it, again, from the human aspect, from what do you feel? One quick design note, we designed literally for the women, because I know in my family, my wife dictates all of our social calendar. She goes somewhere, I'm in tow. So if she feels safe and comfortable and like she likes that place, I will follow her, and I will have the 2 kids in tow with me. So think about that safety level. It goes back into like parking lots and lighting and other things like that so that you can feel safe and comfortable. Multimodal transit. Being transit ready is critical. I'm going to jump into a couple statistics here and refer to my notes. We heard a little bit, I think James mentioned the Pearl Street District in Oregon, and I'll make a plug for this really quickly. Some of the research I did, they spent $104 million building that streetcar line. Within about 5 years, they saw 100 development projects come in within a block radius of that, and they saw $2.3 billion of new investment. That wouldn't have occurred if the local municipality hadn't anticipated the needs for the density and for the development and to do all that kind of stuff. So it's important to be transit ready. It's important to put yourself in a space where you can do that, but also take into consideration what mode of transit, what those walking sheds are, how do you want the streetcar, which is kind of a half-mile increment? Do you want the light rail or the commuter train line? And that changes those distances. So think through those types of things as well. So this is Gresham, Oregon. Allow for some of that, not every place has to be this dense or this tall or those kinds of things, but if you really don't want to subsidize that transit, you need to be able to have those rooftops. I think that's one of the things that we don't do well enough in our profession and in our society is understand how many rooftops it takes to feed. Everybody says, oh, I want the local grocery store, or I want this, or I want that, and they don't understand the economics that goes back into funding and making those operate at a profit level. All right, entitlement process. The last few slides here, so bear with me. Redwood City, and I'll take a step back, California has one of the most, if not the most, stringent environmental regulations in the state. On average, a development proposal would take about 2 years to get through the zoning process, to get through the environmental clearance process. Redwood City, through its adoption of a form-based code, reduced that timeline to, on average, about 5 to 6 months. Okay? Form-based code identified if you have a project, an infill project, and think about this. If I'm allowing development to occur in a greenfield, as a builder, I can build here and I can use the sales from those to fund this one, and I can go to the next one, I can use the funds, and I can keep marching along. If I'm committing to vertical construction, I can't build floors 1 and 2 and sell those and then finance building floors 3 and 4 and keep going like that. I've got to make a commitment up front. So if I don't understand the timing and the political uncertainty that's associated with that, I'm already at a disadvantage. So it's important to think about it. You can deal with small, large, you can set whatever parameters you want at the local government level, whatever your constituency can accommodate. But think about standards from the aspect of performance measures. What does it matter if the building is 7 stories or 8 stories? From the ground floor, from the person walking by on the street, it's an imperceptible difference. What does it matter if the units inside are 1 bedroom and they're 1,200 square feet, or they're 2 bedrooms and 1,700 square feet? Allow the market to drive that kind of stuff. This plan has I'm going to say this slowly and maybe a second time. This plan has no per parcel densities. No per parcel densities. It's an area-wide plan that says, okay, you can develop, and there's a maximum development that says, okay, you can develop up to 2,500 in this particular area, but if the market comes in and I'm a developer or I'm assembling land and I can get this area, why as a local government should I care if it's that? Now there is a key to saying, okay, where are there key strategic areas? You want a terminated vista, you want this, you want that in particular areas, but allow for that and then get out of the way. So these are some examples. There are maps, there are charts, there's text associated with that, but we saw a whole series of development that occurred as a wave of this, and I'll make one last plug before I get to that other point. Think about the form of parking. Parking is critical. We heard that in the previous presentation. But in the first 2 years of development, we saw about 2,000 units in the first 2 years come online in that area. Now these densities, again, look at those densities. Every one of those is an infill project. The one that you see there on the bottom, 525 Middlefield, 193 units a year. That took 6 months to get through. Okay? Unheard of and unprecedented even in California. And we heard yesterday, Jill mentioned the best success, or the best message is your success. We didn't have to do 1 ounce of advertising. You don't think that the word of mouth traveled fast enough to get folks like Lennar and the big developers coming in and paying top dollar? The city didn't have to do anything in terms of land assembly. All they had to do was set the regulatory tone and get out of the way. The same thing is true for commercial development. 300,000 square feet, 1,000 paces of parking, new hospitals. Stanford University moved, they had a restriction where they couldn't develop anymore in Palo Alto, so they took a lot of their non-academic functions and built 1.5 million square feet in Redwood City. Those are examples about partnerships. Leveraging public-private partnerships. The city, the building that you see on the left, the Century Theaters, is a project that I worked on in particular. The city, in that instance, was able to assemble land. They built a 2-level below-ground parking structure. They were able to sell the air rights to the developer. There's 88,000 square feet of retail and restaurant and a 20-screen movie theater up above. You have examples like that where you can deal with that. Really quickly, because my time is getting short, this was an example. The building on the left is a federal post office. This area that you see, this paseo that's in between, was a goat path that was unkept. The new Homeland Security requirements that said that it had to all be fenced off, and it was in the heart of downtown. We were able to negotiate with the federal government to lease that land to the city. We did a low-impact development, LID, rain garden, kind of there on the left. What you see just past the redwood trees on the right-hand side was we were able to sublease the area to the local restaurant. They built an outdoor dining area, and that lease terms that they pay funds all of the city's costs to sublease it to lease it from the government. I don't have time to push this, but this is privately owned, publicly accessible open spaces, PAPOS. San Francisco is doing a lot of these, and there's a whole network. It almost becomes like, I don't know if any of you have heard of geo tracking, but there's a whole game in San Francisco where you get your GPS unit and you try to find all these places, and they turn it into this it's kind of geeky, but it is Silicon Valley after all. All right, last thing I want to mention, parking management. We heard a little bit yesterday, I think Joseph mentioned, one of the things that the local municipalities can think about is stormwater. Parking is one of those other things that can be a really critical government function. Market rate pricing, there's a gentleman, a professor out of UCLA named Donald Shoup. He has a book out called The High Cost of Free Parking. I'll mention that because it shows you the real benefits of trying to manage a municipal supply. You can, at the risk of being social engineering, you can say, okay, this is going to cost 75 cents an hour, and this area is going to be free for the first hour and a half, and those that want it will choose that, so you can kind of help direct people and give people options and choices. You can think about how to set up special revenue districts so that money goes back into that same district, that you can pay for additional street sweeping and police officers and things like that. You can have multi-space meters that are all connected on Wi-Fi that you can go through. I can sit there on my smartphone and I can tell it, okay, I'm going to pay this one and I want you to send me a text when my meter's running out, so I never get a parking ticket. Redwood City instituted these and had a position where people come in, what do you mean I have to pay? And I said, well, Palo Alto, the city of the South, doesn't charge you anything. And I said, oh, they don't, do they? They collect $77,000 a year in parking citations. You don't think you pay? You may not pay 15 cents or 25 cents each time you park, but that one time you get a $45 parking ticket, they got you for at least 2 or 3 years, you know? So, you know, introducing this. Last story I'll say real quickly. Don't underestimate the value of having a good ambassador at the local level. My colleague and I, when these were first instituted, walked outside with $20 in change in our pocket, and we walked around that neighborhood and that downtown environment for a better part of 2 days. And anytime we saw somebody that wanted a chance to park there, we fed the meter for them and said, let me show you how this works. The amount of goodwill that gained the city, invaluable. Okay, rather than people calling, I lost my quarter, you know. All right, I'll stop there, but just last note, plan for success. The newspaper articles will come, the word of mouth will spread, it's out there. Just, you know, be conscious about your thought process, be creative in your thought process, understand the market, and then be a good partner, all right? This guy's been around for a while, so he might know, or he was around for a while and has been gone for a while, but it's stood the test of time. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy on not on fighting the old, but on building anew. So I'm past my time. Thank you very much.